Panda versus Vandal is one of those questions that's really been going on for an immense amount of time since the game really came out. And this article kind of helped answer a lot of questions that people had about the Phantom versus the Vandal. While I don't think there's a definitive answer of which one's better, I think it's better to be adaptive and understand when you pick up the Phantom and when you pick up the Vandal. And if you have a Phantom, what fights can I take? If I have a Vandal, what fights can I take? This is what this article has helped to answer. So I'm going to be going over like what parts are important from this article. So first we're going to look at the kill distribution curve, and the easiest part to take away from this is that the Phantom is more effective than the Vandal below 15 meters, while the Vandal is more effective above 20 meters. And somewhere in the middle, about 15 to 20 meters, they're about equal. But the harder part to take from this, and the more important part to take from this, is that these 6 points show us quite a bit. In that this is a kill distribution curve, so about 60% of our Phantom kills are coming from this range, and about 54% of our Vandal kills, Vandal kills are coming from this range. So we can probably see, like, if we're going to take fights, if we're looking at this solely, right, and we're saying to ourselves before a round starts, where I'm going to take a fight from, and we look at this range, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't pick the Phantom over the Vandal. Because the Phantom, not only does it get more kills at this range, but it actually falls within more of its range, of its effective range. Well, the Vandal actually has none of its effective range here over the Phantom, right? It actually performs equally at this range than the Phantom, and the Phantom beats it at these ranges. So clearly looking at this graph, I can say the Phantom is stronger than the Vandal at this range, right? And looking at this graph, it seems like I'm more likely to get kills with the Phantom than I am the Vandal. But obviously it's a bit more nuanced than that, right? You can't just say that from one piece of one graph. And also, this game is more than just graphs. There are plenty of things that we can adapt to and change. And no doubt that if we adapt to and change those things, this graph will look different the next time. So let's have a look at some other graphs. Okay, so if we look at kill distribution by range, the main thing I want to take away from this graph is the range at 30 plus meters. And like the kill distribution at 30 plus meters. The Vandal gets more kills at 30 plus meters than the Phantom does. And the reason for this is probably to do with the Phantom falling off and getting less damage on headshot, not having a lethal headshot at over 30 meters. And we can actually plan around this, right? So we can say to ourselves, like, I'm going to be on Pearl this round. I'm going to be fighting a lot on the long, right? So why would I not just go a Vandal? Because the majority of the range I'm going to be fighting at is going to be 30 meter fights, right? 30 meter plus fights. So I'm going to have a Vandal, because if I'm going to be fighting that range, why wouldn't I have a Vandal if it's like 5%, just under 5% better? More likely to get me a kill. So then we'll go over to the next one, which is Phantom versus Vandal pick rate. Okay, so the Phantom versus Vandal pick rate kind of surprised me a tiny bit. So this was obvious to me, but this was not obvious to me. The Pro Player one was not obvious to me at all, but this one was fairly obvious. So the reason why this one was obvious is because it's a flashy weapon. 1 tap's up cooler than 2 taps. And on top of that as well, the Vandal is not really a gun that needs to adapt very much, because it's in of itself, it doesn't have any fluctuation in its performance, right? It's always going to deal 160 to the head, always going to deal 40 to the body, and it doesn't have any fluctuation there. It only has a fluctuation when it's compared to the Phantom at 15 meters, right? Or below 15 meters below, right? Because then you can just say you should use the Phantom, right? Because it's more effective, it has more bullets, has a higher fire rate, you're more likely to get the kill at those short ranges. Like the previous graphs have agreed with that, right? So it does boggle me that this number is as high as it is. It does make sense it's lower though. I'm just happy at least that it's lower. And bear in mind there's going to be significantly less games played here than there are here. So, you know, it's probably about on par, to be honest. And it does surprise me a tiny bit, because I would expect the Phantom to be a bit more valuable. Because you'd think at top, like the higher levels of play, players are going to be more conscious of what fights they're going to take before the round. They're going to have more foresight in what guns they need to take what fights, right? And I think there's some like argument you can say, like, well, maybe all the valuable fights that pro players value are fights over 50 meters. But I'm not sure if that's really the case. I feel like majority of fights are happening with where it's consistent on the previous graphs we've seen within like the 5 meters to 20 meters mark, which definitely is Phantom territory. So I do find it very weird that the Phantom is underutilized in the pro play. I also think as well, with the ability that pro players have to, or pro teams, sorry, have to go light armor across the board to save economy, and they have the ability to do that as a team, definitely makes the Phantom more valuable. Because you essentially, by buying a Phantom, you prevent that play, right? You prevent that play to a certain extent, right? Because you are able to. I mean, I guess it's something as well. Like if you realize that, then you can counter it. But the thing is that the Vandal's breakpoints are 120 and then 160, so you don't actually see in between 125 and 150 unless they make you see it, right? Unless they allow you to see it in like an eco or something, right? So it's actually quite difficult for players to like adapt to that in game. So I think having a Phantom, like playing majority Phantom most of the time, is actually a lot better in pro play. So this is also another thing that helps to illustrate my point. This is one of the most important graphs here. So what happens after a Phantom does 140 headshot damage to a Vandal player? And the answer is the Phantom wins 78% of the time. So we can say within 15 to 30 meters, the Phantom wins 78% of the time, provided it lands the first bullet. So what we can say even further, what we can like take from that is, if the player is good enough to land this first bullet, they will win with the Phantom, which kind of shows to me like pro players should be using the Phantom majority of the time, right? Majority of your fights, or majority of lethal fights across the board, are taken within the 5 meters to 20 meters range from the first graph, right? So that means even 10 meters after that, the Phantom wins if you have the aim to back that up, right? So to me, this shows like the Vandal is overvalued, and really should only be bought and used if you intend to make a play that involves you shooting or taking a fight over 30 meters. And if you happen to have a Vandal, then you should be looking for plays that play into that strength. If you have a Phantom, you should be looking for plays that stay away from what the Vandal strength is, provided you're on a level playing field. Obviously, the operator also has like an important role in like some of these like decisions, right? Where if the enemy team has an operator and all Phantoms, the Vandal's gonna have a tough time still because it has to kind of maneuver its way around the fact that they have an operator to still find the effective range where it still beats out the Phantom. Okay, so this is the last graph. It's going to be KD against enemy armor, and it really highlights the fact that the Phantom has to make more decisions than the Vandal. So the Vandal has to make no decisions here, right? It's always going to do 160 to the head, and it's the same amount of bullets for heavy armor and light armor. It's 4 to the body, and 3 to the body if they're eco, right? Or like no armor. And the Phantom doesn't have that luxury, right? Against a light armor, they can't take a fight 50 meters away, and against heavy armor, they ideally don't want to take a fight 30 meters away. But like I said from the previous graph, they win 78% of the time if they land a headshot, so good players probably won't care as much about that, because they'll probably follow up with a kill anyway. Probably follow up with like a body shot and get the kill anyway, or another headshot. And so it really does highlight the fact that the Phantom has to make more decisions when it comes to actually taking fights. So in conclusion, I think this is very much about preference. I think there's not really much in terms of solo queue and ranked to say that you should use one or the other. I think if you really want a definitive answer for that, you probably just want to say Vandal on attack, Phantom on defense. I think it makes a lot of sense because you can pick your fights more on defense. So Vandal makes more sense on defense. You can't pick as many of your fights on attack, so you probably want Vandal, right? Because Vandal's a bit more broad with what it can take on, while the Phantom definitely has its niches where it really excels compared to the Vandal. And if you want like a more in-depth answer, it's probably a line of questioning similar to, do you have what it takes to adapt, and do you have the foresight to know what fights you're going to take, and what fights you've planned for, and what gun does that warrant having, right? So if my plan is to go straight into sight, blast satchel in, I say blast satchel all the time, blast back in, or satchel in with raise, so I'm going to be right on top of them, does it really make much sense for me to have a Vandal? Like if I have a Phantom there, it's probably so much better, right? Even on attack, I found a way that I think the Phantom is better, right? And the same way, like you can go B Pearl defense, right? If I'm gonna fight on long, the Vandal makes more sense on defense there. So it's just about having an idea of what your play looks like, I think, overall, and adapting on the fly. And I don't think every player can do that, but I think majority of the high ranked players, especially professional players, should be making more better decisions when it comes to knowing what fights they're going to take. But there you go. That's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.